Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. I am Carlos Chacon. And sorry about that. And we are going to wrap this one up, I believe, this year. This is going to be probably the last one for the year.
All right.
I thought we have a couple. We have a listener question, if you will, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Solorigate. Is that what we're calling it?
I hope
that
not.
That sounds like a lot of work. Yeah. the SolarWinds Breach is fine.
SolarWinds Breach. Okay. I feel like that's actually more syllables, but I digress.
Yes, but it sounds less like a political scandal.
Yeah.
There we go. Clickbait, right? Isn't that what we're looking for? Okay, so compañeros, welcome again. Before we get into that, so again, this is going to be SQLDataPartners.com/211. And I want to talk a little bit about some SQL Server in the news. So again, right, one of those things that I feel like I'm hiding under a rock. And did you know, I'm sure Kevin knows, that there's an extension for developing Microsoft SQL Server, basically database pieces. It feels very like, or it looks very much like Visual Studio did when it first came out. You could connect to a database, write a select statement, and there wasn't a whole lot more you could do. But they have an extension now for developing that in Visual Studio. Have you been using that at all?
You mean Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio? I thought database projects have been Visual Studio for years.
Yeah, database projects have been Visual Studio since Data Dude. You're talking 2008. Azure Data Studio database projects are new.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Azure. Okay, so here's what I'm looking at. I am looking at, and of course now I have to go back and find it.
His copy of SQL Server 2008 Fundamentals.
Yeah. So the reason I bring this up is because they announced it. Okay, so this is under the SQL Tools December recap.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is the Azure Data Studio 1.25. Okay, there you go. This is the SQL Database Projects extension in Azure, right? Connect the dots here, Carlos.
There you go.
So next up, we're going to show you the mighty things available to you in SQL Server 2008 R2. All of the services updates. A 10-part series.
Yeah, the changes to SSRS from 2005 release, phenomenal. Huge stuff.
Lines.
Yeah, I heard about this. I think Elizabeth Noble did a blog post about it.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. So that's how I heard about it, if I got that right. But it's definitely interesting to see the tooling becoming more fully featured and all of that, for sure.
Yeah, again, right. So not having to use multiple tools, right? If you want to do something, I'll say straightforward, right?
I've used the Visual Studio database projects for over a decade, and they have their flaws, they have their problems, but if you have a reasonably simple schema, they work really well. It's when you have a lot of complications where you have cross-database queries, cross-server queries, that things start falling apart. As soon as you introduce circular dependencies, when the solution becomes, well, if you have multiple builds of your database project that have different subsets of your objects in them, and you chain them together one after the other, you'll eventually get this thing to build. When you're at that state, you say, yeah, this isn't for me. Azure Data Studio's projects, I looked at them when they were early in public preview. So things have changed since then.
Right. Yeah. So it looks like they've been, again, kind of maybe available for a little while. It looks like March was kind of the first big, release, if you will. And then it seems like, at least by the post, it seems like they have entered, I don't know if GA is the right word, right? But they're like, hey, we're a real tool now.
Yeah. My recollection was that there were still things that weren't available in the Azure Data Studio database project that was available in the Visual Studio database projects, but some of those gaps I'm sure have been covered since then.
Right, and I think they put special emphasis on being able to connect to Azure SQL database, right, and SQL data warehouses. So I think it's a little more, and there's another emphasis on IntelliSense, right? So that may have been improved somewhat, right, as we go along here. So anyway, interesting tidbit coming from the blog today. Okay, so we do have a couple of compañeros shoutouts. So Dale Hurt, Alex Powers, Chris Albert, Tony Hochembauer. Is that fair? No, Tony, I'm sorry.
It's probably like Hockenbauer or something like that.
Hockenbauer.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds right to me.
And then Lars Rasmussen.
Howdy, Lars.
Yeah, say Lars.
Dale, hi.
Mentioned a couple of, or he thought our discussion on last episode, 210 was good on pass and community and kind of what will come next. I think lots more folks are getting some of their thoughts out, and I haven't finished it, but Andy, oh gosh, why am I forgetting? Andy in Orlando.
Oh, Andy Warren.
Warren, yes, had a fairly lengthy post on it, and had some interesting, again, because he I feel like we think about Godfather community people, right? He's definitely one of those. So. Okay, so compañeros, we've been asking, we did it on social media, I should say, and I don't know that I've actually brought it up here, right? Shame on us. We've been trying to tackle a couple of different things. So one of the things we're going to invite you to do, right? So obviously we're streaming now. We're looking for a bit more engagement, a bit more real-time reaction. How about that? So you can engage in the conversation when you're able to join with us. Admittedly, I need to work with Kevin and Eugene and nail down a
proper schedule,
a semi reasonable schedule. That's right. The end of the year is always a tough time to decide what your schedule is going to be like.
Yeah, a little bit.
But yeah, we want to do that. But we've been inviting, or we're going to attempt to use the hashtag Ask SDPP. SQL Data Partners Podcast. So if you'd like to participate, have a question or something that you think you should be talking to us about, of course, you can go through the normal channels and you reach out directly to us on LinkedIn, things like that. But if you wanted to tag it, we can bring it up. Now, I'm going out on a limb because this. Oh, go ahead.
Can they still call the voicemail line?
Yeah. So the voicemail line is gone the way of the dodo.
The Telegram line's still up though, so if you know your Morse code, you should be fine.
So Mala is a hero in the SQL Data Partners lore as the only person ever to have successfully used the voice line.
That's right. She goes down in as a first
in history.
Right?
It's like being a Microsoft certified master. It's a rare breed now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Never to be duplicated. I shouldn't say never, but very, very unlikely to be duplicated. If I was a betting person, I would not take that bet.
The SQL Data Partners landline.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay, so Ryan, I'm just going to refer to him as Ryan because he didn't expressly say that, hey, you can take this and
you don't want to violate GDPR.
Yeah, and make it available. So we'll just refer to him as Ryan. So connected with me recently, and he said, "Hey, I'm looking to make a career change." Right? He reached out. He's been listening to the podcast and thought, "Hey, you guys are interesting. I like what you're doing." but he is not currently in an IT, and I think he has IT, some IT responsibilities, but he'd like to get into business intelligence, right? And so he's looking to build a network and look for some opportunities. And so I thought we'd take a second and make sure we're giving Ryan some feedback. And one of the things that just reached out to me was Nikki. Why can I not remember her name? I need to connect him with Nikki over in the UK.
From prior episodes.
That's right, from prior episodes. She was here. She has been doing quite a bit, trying to put together some courses and whatnot on helping folks get into visualizations and whatnot. And so she might be a good resource, right? So when you think about network connecting, I can definitely pass her name and content along. So I know we've talked in just even episode 210, our thoughts were a bit more geared towards the new graduate, right? But I guess hot takes on, you've been working for a little while, right? So Ryan's not a spring chicken, so I'm going to assume he's at least in his 30s, maybe even pushing 40, and wants to look for a career change. Thoughts on what Ryan can do to do that?
I'll start since Eugene is looking back. So
fixing my lights.
He has a headset mic. He could talk while he's looking back that way.
I could.
The physiological nature of his moving back there is like, oh, he's out of the conversation for the moment.
Well, inherently, I lean back to breathe, but the mic follows me, so it doesn't work, right?
So, first bit of general advice: it is a lot easier to get a job when you have a job. If you have a job already, keep the job. Don't quit just to go look full time. It is a lot harder to get a job that way. Second bit is that quite often those sorts of transitions can happen within an existing job. So it may be possible that at the current position, if you take on some IT responsibilities, there might actually be openings to do more work in the BI space in the current position. That is going to depend on a manager. Essentially, if your manager is interested in your growth, which some of them are, you may be able to start picking up some stuff. You may be able to try to integrate business intelligence concepts with what you're doing today. If not, let's say current manager or current role is completely unsuited. Sorry, you're on the custodial staff, and they don't want you building out dashboards of where kids vomit. Even though I think that'd be interesting. But suppose that you're just in a role that is completely misaligned for that. It might be possible to transfer to another position within the company, maybe. But the goal is to get some experience doing this new thing, because it is really difficult to get a company to hire you if, let's say you have done custodial work and you're trying to get a job in business intelligence. It is extremely difficult to get a company to hire you at that point, because companies tend to be pretty risk averse about hiring new people. It is hard to get rid of people, so the slow to hire, quick to fire, the quick to fire part isn't always applicable, which makes them even slower to hire.
Sure.
So the more experience that you have in your current position, doing the things that you want to do, the better off you are. Working on stuff on the side, working on stuff at home, having that personal portfolio, the open source projects, the certifications, the coursework that you've done, at the margin, that can be helpful. But for a hiring manager, generally, the most important thing is, you've done this kind of work before. There are exceptions. You might find a person who says, yeah, I'm willing to take you in at essentially entry-level pay, entry-level work. That might be a lot less than what you're getting paid today. If you're willing to take that, that might open some doors. But usually at that point, you have to make a good personal connection with the hiring manager.
Right.
That's not something where you could helicopter drop a bunch of resumes and expect to get calls back.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea of trying to leverage what you have, internally. Obviously, it's probably a pretty big leap, and I don't think Ryan is working in has custodial duties. But getting access to some of those tools, right, and some of the data, because if you understand some of the business problems, right, that your company is having, it's much easier to then start trying to tackle some of that,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
you have a problem to solve, or you have something that people are talking about. You can understand the context of that, rather than going in blind and hey, let me open up Power BI and start putting
Right.
together a dashboard with it.
I purposefully picked custodial as what is one of the things that would be the hardest to make a move from.
Right.
So in a more, call it realistic, I'm sure that there are people who do janitorial work and want to become BI people.
And if you're listening to this podcast, let us know, because I'd be very interested to see how you got here.
Yeah,
that's fair. But more realistically, all right, you're in some type of white collar position where you're a George Jetson button pusher, or you operate on widgets somewhere. And if you want to make that transition, that's a lot easier because, well, look, if you're in business, you're using Excel. Everybody uses Excel. It's the nature of the world.
Sure.
Hey, Excel has they have business intelligence integration already out of the box. B, there is Power Query and Power BI. That's an opportunity where I can, learn DAX. I think we have a person here who might be able to get you a discount code on how to learn DAX. And
probably.
Yeah, maybe just a tiny discount.
Well, I'm just thinking if I have a discount code or not, but probably.
So being able to take your current responsibilities and go just a little further. Like, oh, well, here's this project where I have to come up with, say, information on our top customers. All right, well, I can do that. I will do the job here, but let me also here's another tab where maybe I'm doing something else. I'm doing kind of the next step, and if you're able to show that off, that might be enough value that, oh yeah, I want you to keep doing this. I want you to do something else. So even if not, you're still getting the experience where you would say, okay, well, if I had to solve this problem, if I had to build out a dashboard of our top customers, let's say you're in customer support and you have 150 customers assigned to you, you might build out a dashboard for yourself of, well, based on my time that I spend on customers, based on the tickets I receive from customers, based on information here, which customers are the ones that I need to follow up on today, et cetera, et cetera. Just being able to systematize, collect, store, process, and visualize that information is a BI project.
Yeah. So just some quick thoughts specifically about the business intelligence portion. Because he says in his question, if Carlos transcribed it right, he's looking. One of the reasons he's interested in business intelligence is he likes solving business problems with technology. And I would say that I fell into that trap. And that the fundamental skill, the first primary tier skill that you need to succeed in business intelligence is requirements gathering. And not necessarily contingency planning, but imagining like, okay, how could this requirement go wrong when we try to implement it, right? That is the fundamental skill before the technology or anything else. And then second to that is just basic data literacy, enough so that you're not stumbling around and trying to do those implementations. So let me give you an example from a real customer doing work with Carlos. The names will be changed to protect the innocent, right? So we have a customer and we're trying to build reporting for them. And one of the things they have are estimates. We say, hey, I'm gonna sell you this thing or this service. It's going to cost $10,000. And estimates can have different statuses. They can, it can be won, it can be lost, it can be revised, it can be canceled, all this kind of stuff. And so they said they wanted to report on the percentage of the different statuses. What's the percentage of lost? What's the percentage of won? All that kind of stuff. And so you run into very quickly, okay, the naive implementation is the count of that status divided by the total number of estimates. And you're like, that's easy. And then they tell you, oh, wait, no. Some of these have a shared original estimate number. We want to ignore revisions. And you're like, okay. So what I'll do is I'll take the percentage, or I'll take the count of the status type, so count of one, divided by the distinct count of the original number. So that way I'll ignore any revisions that refer to the same original estimate. Easy. And then you look at the data and it doesn't add up to 100%. You've got it going over 100% sometimes. And the problem is there's instances where you have the original estimate number and it goes, the first one was lost, the second one was revised, and the third one was won. And the problem is for this software vendor, we told them about it and they said that shouldn't be able to happen, right? Like that shouldn't be a thing. But again, one of the customers using their software, that's how they marked it. They marked it as like, here was our first bid, it was lost, we revised it, and then the third one was won. And so now the logic I have to implement is much more complex, because instead of just, okay, it's, numerator over denominator, or instead of, okay, it's numerator over unique denominator, it's numerator over denominator minus these instances where it's not one kind of thing. And so that's a perfect example of what in my mind, the core of business intelligence, how I get people to pay me $100 and whatever per hour, is I have to be able to talk with someone. And it's like the Spice Girls thing. It's like, tell me what you want, tell me what you really, really want. And you just have to anticipate that they're saying they want X, they're saying they want faster horses, when really what they want is a car, and how to get there.
I have two responses. One is,
Please.
I did not wake up this morning expecting to hear a Spice Girls reference.
Fair. Totally fair.
Two, I am coining Fiesel's second law, because I already have Fiesel's law. Fiesel's second law is all data is dirty. There are no exceptions.
Yeah. No, if
you think it's clean, you just haven't found it yet, right?
That's
yeah.
true.
There was a Twitter conversation about, incremental loads versus full nightly refreshes. And Daniel was talking about how, the customer tells you, oh yeah, there's no way this data would change. That would be illegal. It's financial data. There's no way someone would be manually changing the data.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. Yep. Fun.
So you'll forgive me. I was trying to, unless we're having a little problem with the stream, but we'll have to figure that out. The show, as they say, must go on.
Yeah, I left so I wasn't inflating your counts, because I think there was a point where I was the only one there. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so to then get to the topic of our conversation today.
Yep.
So hopefully, Ryan, that was helpful to you. So not to push you aside by any stretch of the imagination. But I thought we would talk. I saw lots of data platform folks talking about the SolarWinds.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Hack, is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breach.
Infiltration. Yeah.
And the reason that this then is so serious for us is because we have, lots of folks are using SolarWinds, right? It's a very popular tool, and even non, this isn't database specific, right? These are a lot of network monitoring and whatnot, and so I think lots of folks are affected, right, by this.
Well, and even more so, I think in October or something, they agreed to buy SentryOne, didn't they, or something like that?
They did.
Yeah. So now SentryOne is embroiled in this massive market loss of SolarWinds, like $1 billion just gone overnight in the stock market.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah, okay, so I hadn't seen that piece of it, right? But hopefully they got all the contracts signed before
Yeah, exactly.
before this came out, because I could imagine that being no, yeah, so again, and we should define this, and as Kevin mentioned before we went live, right? We have a bunch of non-security people talking about a sophisticated cyber attack. So you'll forgive us if we miss a couple of things, but so this is the SolarWinds Orion platform, right?
Mhm.
So not necessarily, again, because they have they've purchased several companies. They
Right.
purchased the what was the um, Confio, right, product, and made that their database platform. And so there are lots of verticals, if you will, right, that SolarWinds can touch. But I believe that the Orion is ultimately the I don't know, like the mothership, if you will.
Gotcha. So
Yeah, the
uh,
platform.
it looks like SolarWinds has a market capitalization of 5.3 billion, if I'm reading Yahoo Finance correctly. And there was a point they've rebounded some, but on December 18th they were down about 33%. So yeah, literally $1 billion in market capitalization just gone over the period of a few days. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, they're a very large organization. They have one of the best products out there, maybe the best product out there as far as network monitoring goes.
Mm.
So this
Yeah.
is big. I mean, you're talking basically what 80% of the Fortune 500, uh, a large number of federal agencies in the U.S. I'm sure lots of other government agencies across the world
Yep.
using their platform. And there's malicious code that was able to get transmitted. They used the old dressing up as a janitor to sneak into the building technique.
Well, the problem is the DLLs were signed, so you didn't just dress up as a janitor. You got a laminated ID badge that verified who you were. Like it's crazy the amount of effort that was gone to by these state actors.
Yeah, so to illuminate what Eugene and I are talking about,
Yeah,
I'm
please.
totally using illuminate in the Demolition Man style, that
Huh.
as a verb. Um,
You could elucidate as well if you'd like.
no, definitely this is illuminate.
Okay.
But to give you a quick idea of what was happening, yeah, like Eugene mentioned, basically there was compromised code that was checked in and deployed
Yeah.
from SolarWinds. So from the looks of it, somebody was able to get access to check-in code. They were able to do it in at least one class or actually in at least one project for SolarWinds. There is an article from Microsoft digging into the details. Microsoft was in a unique position for this because they were able to use their power to take over the malicious domain that was being used.
Yep.
And as a result, they were able to get a lot of information of how this thing operates, because this was a fairly sophisticated set of defense mechanisms where if you were running certain tools like Wireshark, if you were running a test domain, if you were had SolarWinds in the domain, it would not fire.
Yeah, it remained dormant.
That way, yeah, basically try to make it so that security professionals and SolarWinds employees don't see anything out of the ordinary, that it's only outsiders who do.
Yeah.
And only in production.
Yep.
So they did some smart stuff here, and somehow were able to get access to make changes to source control for SolarWinds.
Well, that was the key piece that at least that I thought was interesting, is that they only needed a very small subset. So they basically got into a class that invoked a function.
Mm-hmm.
So that function they could control. So it was only just those couple of lines of code. So it didn't seem like they actually needed, a whole lot more. Like once they were in, they were in. And as long as they didn't get deleted, they could do anything they wanted.
Yeah, basically they're able to load a DLL in a parallel thread and
Right.
have that bootstrap up whatever executables they wanted to run, whatever executable code or whatever code they wanted to execute. Let me try to be clearer on that.
Sure.
So yes, they did not need to put the whole payload into the SolarWinds Orion .core.business layer.dll. Instead, that thing just calls out to code elsewhere that is available and looks for executables that are on the system in order to do whatever activities, whatever command and control activities the attacker wanted.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So then it talks about I don't know the core things, right? Just go in there and start snooping around, right? Can I account escalation, and can I find something that would give me access to this, and then can I use that to get access to something else, and so
Right.
Scary stuff, right?
Yeah. So there was an article that Leslie Carhart put out basically the day of. I think this was on the 14th. No, it was on the 13th. Yeah, so it was the day of. And she pointed out, look, if you go back to a couple of years ago with NotPetya, this is basically the next iteration of how NotPetya worked.
Yeah.
This NotPetya was quite sophisticated. And there's a really good article here that I am browsing through about how the thing worked, how it pretended to be ransomware, but it really was a lot more than that, and kind of took advantage of common mistakes in the security world. And essentially, her argument was, look, if you were outside of Ukraine, you got really lucky that NotPetya was focused specifically in that geographic area. And just because this time it was focused over there doesn't mean next time it won't be focused on you.
Sure.
This is a similar style. This is a similar set of processes that now affects a large number of companies potentially. As in, they had the software on there. Were they actually breached? Who knows?
Well, interestingly enough, so this week in the United States, anyway, right? The Justice Department just announced that they've experienced a breach.
That's after Commerce and Treasury are willing to admit it.
Right.
And by the way, same software, Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, the Air Force, Department of Homeland Security, probably some three-letter agencies that we don't talk about.
Yeah, that's right.
I would not be shocked if some of those agencies aren't telling us that, yeah, they've been breached too.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and right, I don't think they didn't mention this software, but ultimately that it was a the supply chain, right? So it's a piece of software that others are using, but it would make sense that this is the one, right? Because it's a very large organization used in lots of different places, right? Very common.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what the only problem I have with kind of bringing this topic up is because a lot of times in this program we like to make things approachable, and but in this case I feel like, oh man, just turn your internet off. That's the only option because I feel like there's not a super it took a team of Microsoft security folks, right, to be able to figure this one out.
No, it was what was the name of the company? It was a different security company that first discovered it, like Firewatch or something.
FireEye did.
You.
Fire.
Yeah.
So
it was good.
Yeah, FireEye actually was using SolarWinds Orion because up until the 13th, people thought, yeah, it's good software. And so they were actually a user and they noticed what was happening. They published on the 13th a write-up of the malware infrastructure. Looks like, I think, Eugene, you mentioned that the first compromises were back in March. So FireEye itself had a breach.
Yeah.
And basically it was because of the SolarWinds Orion attack. So essentially, they write this stuff up. By the 14th, the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is probably too many uses of the word security in one sentence, the CISA essentially said, okay, all non-defense federal agencies, because they don't control Department of Defense,
Right.
All non-defense federal agencies, you must shut off any machine that has SolarWinds Orion installed by noon of the next day. Those machines are not allowed to come back on. They may not rejoin the domain until A, CISA says it's okay. B, you completely wipe the machines and rebuild Windows. So essentially, destroy those machines.
Yeah, to the ground, pretty much.
Yeah. Now, as far as it goes, this is the tricky part of security, where we do have this conflict between I need a product that's useful and helpful, and I open up a door that somebody could exploit. I mean,
Sure.
Going back to my metaphor about the janitors coming in, you bring in janitors for sensitive organizations, and someone's got to clean those floors. You vet the janitors, you do what you can, but I mean, we go back to classic attacks that come about because someone comes in as an outsider and is able to get past security because you trust the person. That person has a hard hat and a clipboard. They look very important.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you think they're just a janitor, but they're a business intelligence person. They've been learning Power BI and DAX secretly in their spare time.
Boom.
Yeah, and this is not to say, so this is, an example of, and maybe more information will be forthcoming, but I don't think anyone is suggesting that SolarWinds, right, is a,
No.
they're out for, counterfeiting, and whatnot, right? This was I don't want to say isolated, but in the sense that some actor, right, was able to get access, and then because it's such a popular product, right, kind of propagated and made it worse even.
Yeah, I think there are ways this could have been avoided, right? Because you can imagine a world where they had stricter code quality, code checks, they had stricter security. I mean, unless Kevin, do you know if this was this introduced into the source code, or did they just infect one of the DLLs specifically? Because that part's not clear to me.
Code.
Yeah, my expectation was, so this says they inserted malicious code into the DLL, a code library belonging to the SolarWinds Orion platform. So yes, it could potentially have been injected after the fact. They might have taken compiled DLL and modified the IL. I am not positive.
Sure.
Because they actually show the code, but this could just as easily be intermediate compiled code, IL.
Right, they could have decompiled it basically. Yeah, I mean, looking at the article from Microsoft, at first glance, the code in the DL looks normal and doesn't raise suspicions, which could be part of why the insertion of malicious code was undetected for months, especially if the code for this DLL was not frequently updated.
Yeah, so based on that paragraph, that makes me think it was modified source code.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes sense.
Hard to tell.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if they affected the source code and it was a commit somewhere. I mean, assuming they were using source control. Who knows, right? I mean,
Sure.
We've all done the source control of a bunch of zip files with different names, right? There's ways that you can avoid this. The problem that I have is, okay, SolarWinds was big enough and had enough government customers that, maybe they should have considered this possibility. But like, if you're the CSO or something like that, at what point do you decide that you need to add like being infiltrated by a state actor as one of your like risk assessment items? How big of a fish should it be? Good.
That is a thing that CISOs were really pushing over the past 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Once you get big enough, yes, you do have to consider state actors. Now, the problem is when you start talking about we're big enough for state actors, at some point you essentially say, you know what, if major government of your choice wants to get in, they're going to get in.
Sure.
You really can't stop that. The question is, how do you detect it? How do you mitigate? It's not about how do I prevent the US government, the Chinese government, the Russian government, the
Well,
Zimbabwe government.
well, I mean, literally at a certain point, they can just like flood your job board with applications of fully qualified engineers. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, no,
There's a lot of ways.
yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting. So, in a time of globalization, right, when teams are, moving, all over the world, right, there are people, and there is such a need for developers, right, that companies are willing to look in different places. It makes, it compounds the problem. So what I didn't see, and I'm assuming that SolarWinds will have an update, right, post haste.
That update already launched on the 15th.
Okay, so it was there. So basically, if you're using SolarWinds, right, you need to
definitely. They put out a note. It was either the 14th or the 15th, but basically, update to the latest version. If you're using one of these versions, update today. So they already did that. And by the way, I do want to point out that a lot of what we've been talking about here is speculative. Yeah, there's some information which is out. We're not really going to know the full story for months or years, if ever.
Oh, wow.
So the very detailed specifics of how exactly this thing happened, that's the type of stuff that you unravel over the course of a criminal trial. And that's assuming that there is even enough information to get to that point. Our speculations of how things might possibly have occurred, that's all speculation, like I said. So please don't sue us, SolarWinds.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that, so maybe the takeaway here, right, is update. Now, which is always hard because I go back, so SQL Server, they had that cumulative update for 2019 that they ended up rolling back 2 days later, and you're like, no, which is so you kind of I think a lot of folks can be once bitten, twice shy, but it's still something you definitely have to keep up on, right? And because unfortunately that's just the world that we live in now. So
absolutely, definitely keep that software updated. I know that there will be an argument that, well, this shows you don't want to auto update. Like, no, you still do, because yes, the one time you get burned really bad on this, but then on the other side you have, oh, you mean we needed to upgrade that version of struts that we had that was a couple years out of date that caused hundreds of millions of what was that? I believe that was the Anthem breach, where hundreds of millions of people's health information got released because there was an out-of-date version of struts that wasn't in a regular location.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think the number of incidents we've had because of out-of-date stuff, right? It way exceeds the number of things that the number of breaches that happen because you've updated, right?
Right. Realistically, the best thing that could come from this would be, all right, well, how do we scale down these third-party tools so that they do not require sysadmin, they do not require administrative access on servers, that they really do use least privilege, and that here's how we get to least privilege.
Sure.
That I think would be the best thing to come from this.
Yeah. So it would be, it would be interesting, and again, right, I'm sure Microsoft would be very interested in if that goes into a, dare I say, like a microservices, right, type, here's your, the admin things, and here's, what everybody else can work in. And of course you can host all that admin stuff in Azure, and we'll take care of it for you. But it'll be interesting to see where that goes. Okay, well, I think that's going to do it for today. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up here. But as always, you can reach out to us on social media, and you can use the hashtag, right? Ask SDPP, SQL Data Partners Podcast. But if you wanted to reach out to us directly, you may do so. Eugene.
Yeah, you can find me at SQLGene on Twitter or my blog, SQLGene.com.
Kevin.
You can find my info in the Orion Improvement Business Layer.
Mm-hmm.
Yikes. The criminal investigation. If they come after me, I'm going to be like Kevin Fiesel.
It's okay. I hashed the string, so you couldn't easily identify it. You'll get that joke if you read the article.
That's right. So you'll forgive me for those who were trying to catch us on the stream. We were having some problems since I ended that early. So forgive me there. Again, we'll see if we can get that work ironed out. But thanks again for tuning in, compañeros. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm at Carlos L. Chacon. And we'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL Data Partners.